Hello, listeners. This is the last signal radio. It began innocently enough. One drop tapped on my window. I remember thinking, just a passing shower. Others said the same. They opened umbrellas, cars moved slowly down slick streets, and children laughed, jumping into puddles, oblivious to what was coming. For hours, the rain was soft, almost polite, a gentle warning of the apocalypse to follow. But by the next day, the difference was terrifying. In New York, the first reports came from Lower Manhattan. The subways filled faster than engineers could pump them out. Streets became rivers. Cars floated like toys. Emergency services tried to respond, but every attempt failed. People trapped underground made frantic calls, only for the lines to die one by one. Across the Atlantic, London faced similar horror. The Thames Barrier, designed for rare surges, failed catastrophically, flooding Canary Wharf and Southwark. Ancient cathedrals became islands. Residents climbed into rooftops, waving scarves for rescue that never came. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Shibuya Crossing, the bustling heart of the city, was gone beneath 6 meters of water. The neon signs flickered, barely visible through the deluge, as desperate commuters clung to anything that floated. Karachi's low-lying districts were swallowed almost overnight. Families lost homes, businesses, and neighbors in an instant. In Mumbai, the rains turned streets into torrents. Slums that had stood for centuries were swept away, leaving only debris and waterlogged memories. Every continent was touched. Sao Paulo, Jakarta, Manila, Dhaka, names that once sounded ordinary now represented epicenters of global catastrophe. By day 3, scientists issued statements, but no one could comprehend the scale. This wasn't a monsoon. This wasn't a hurricane. This was something beyond the world's capacity to understand. A storm that refused to end. Governments called it the unending flood, though the term felt inadequate. People began documenting whatever devices remained. Phones, cameras, old laptops. But electricity was unreliable, batteries drained, and soon the digital world was silenced along with the physical. The first reports of casualties were devastating. In New York alone, over 15,000 people drowned in the first week, trapped in basements, subways, and under bridges. In Tokyo, fatalities reached 12,500, mostly commuters and elderly residents who couldn't escape the rising waters. Mumbai's slums recorded over 25,000 deaths in the initial surge, numbers later confirmed by limited radio transmissions and satellite imaging before most satellites failed due to the storm. Globally, by the end of week 1, an estimated 120 million people had died, and the flood was just beginning. But it wasn't just the water. Infrastructure failed spectacularly. Bridges collapsed under pressure. Dams, which had held back centuries of water, broke in multiple locations. China's Three Gorges Dam cracked in 2 areas, releasing torrents that merged with already raging rivers. Highways buckled, airports flooded, hospitals were trapped in water with patients still inside. Rescue efforts were hopeless. Helicopters crashed into wind-torn clouds. Boats capsized under currents stronger than any recorded. Amid the chaos, people started to cling to anything high or sturdy. Roofs became lifeboats. Trees became islands. Even skyscrapers were not safe. Windows shattered. Water poured in from broken seams, and elevators became death traps. Entire families perished in apartments that seemed to float before they sank. Children vanished. The elderly were lost first. The statistics were horrifying, but the real terror was personal. Families called out for missing loved ones, only to hear nothing back. The sound of water hitting metal, wood, and concrete became the constant score of a planet at war with itself. And still, the rain did not stop. Day turned into night, with no pause. Clouds darkened further, becoming a solid, oppressive mass. No moon, no stars. People said the storm had a color, gray, sickly, unrelenting. Some thought they could hear the wind screaming like a living thing. Others swore the rain carried voices, though whether hallucination or reality, none could be sure. It was everywhere at once, filling streets, homes, and lungs. It seeped into the walls, into the soil, into the world itself. In those first hours and days, panic spread faster than water. Looting, violence, and despair emerged in cities where emergency protocols had collapsed. Entire communication networks failed. The only constant was the broadcast. Radios crackled with frantic voices, sometimes coherent, sometimes screaming, as people sought help that could not come. Survivors described the water moving in waves that seemed conscious, devouring buildings with precision, carrying cars, trees, even livestock, as if the storm had its own will. And yet, amidst this unimaginable terror, people continued to cling to hope. Those who survived the initial surge began to evacuate upwards, climbing onto rooftops, scaffolding, even floating debris. Some managed to get small boats moving through flooded streets, navigating around floating cars and debris fields. In Venice, gondolas and small boats were no longer tourist attractions. They were lifelines. In New Orleans, the survivors from the flood of decades prior now faced a far greater catastrophe. Streets and levees obliterated beyond repair. This is where humanity's will began to show. People improvised rafts. Schools became shelters. Libraries, with their heavy stone construction, became temporary fortresses. But survival came at a cost. Food rotted quickly. Fresh water was contaminated. Disease began to spread. Reports from Bangkok, Lagos, and Mexico City spoke of cholera, dysentery, and waterborne infections compounding the horror of drowning and destruction. Hospitals struggled to cope before being swallowed themselves. Doctors worked tirelessly, often themselves trapped in water-filled wards. And so the rain continued, without a pause. No one knew why it had started. Meteorologists tried to model it. Climatologists suggested jet stream anomalies. Some said a sudden, unprecedented climate shift had saturated the atmosphere beyond its capacity, creating a self-sustaining rain cycle. Others whispered darker theories, some kind of planetary imbalance, an unknown atmospheric phenomenon, or worse, a reaction to humanity's destruction of nature. But theories mattered little to those on the rooftops, clinging to life as the water swallowed streets, cars, and homes. By the end of the first week, the global death toll was staggering. Over 250 million people missing or dead, millions more displaced. Major cities had disappeared under the water. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Cairo, Jakarta, Dhaka, Rio de Janeiro, Manila. Entire coastlines were unrecognizable, reshaped by the relentless flow of water. Rivers merged into seas. Lakes expanded into cities. Mountains became islands in a drowned world. Yet the rain persisted. It didn't pause for grief. It didn't pause for rebuilding. It didn't pause for humanity. And that is what I want you to remember, listeners. The rain is not a storm. It is not temporary. It is permanent. It is a new reality. And in this reality, the first lesson is clear. Survival will demand adaptation, ingenuity, and an acceptance that the world we knew is gone. So, as the water continues to rise, as the clouds darken further and the cities disappear beneath the flood, remember this. Those who survive will be those who climb higher, build smarter, and refuse to surrender to the rain. The rest are already part of history, washed away and forgotten by the waters. It has been 6 months. 180 days of relentless rain. Not a pause, not a moment of silence, not a single day when the world could catch a breath. 6 months of ceaseless downpour, and the world is starting to forget the sound of stillness. The sound is everywhere. It has become alive. A constant roar that rattles the chest, vibrates bones, and gnaws at the mind. People say it's like standing beneath a waterfall stretched across continents. But it is worse. It is everywhere, filling every corner of cities, mountains, and oceans alike. And the sky is no longer sky. It is a solid ceiling of water, a living weight pressing down on every home, every survivor. There is no blue, no sunlight, no moon, no stars, just gray, endless layers of cloud, pulsing and shifting with a rhythm of destruction. Los Angeles, once a city of sun and palm trees, now lies beneath a gray ocean sky, streets flowing with water, cars drifting like leaves. Shanghai and Hong Kong are submerged under 10 feet of water, their skyscrapers jutting like jagged islands. Lagos, Buenos Aires, Kolkata, Istanbul, all drowned, all silenced. The human toll is staggering. Initial estimates are outdated within hours. By the first month, over 400 million people were dead or missing, trapped in flooding that moved faster than rescue could reach them. Hospitals in flooded zones, Cairo, Dhaka, Manila, collapsed under the weight of water, patients trapped inside. Entire neighborhoods in Mumbai vanished in a night. In New York, rooftops became islands of desperation, people waiting for rescue that never came. Electricity failed worldwide. Satellites, the only way to observe the storm, went offline or were destroyed. Communication networks broke. Cell towers toppled. Radios crackled. Only pockets of survivors remained, clinging to high ground, scavenging for food, shelter, and batteries. Nature itself is failing under the deluge. The Amazon rainforest has trees torn from their roots, animals swept away in raging torrents. African savannas are flooded, leaving wildlife scrambling for higher ground. Even deserts like the Sahara are no longer safe. Flash floods have transformed arid land into lethal traps. Global ecosystems are unraveling under a single, relentless force. Disease spreads faster than the water. Contaminated drinking water triggered outbreaks of cholera, dysentery, and leptospirosis. Hospitals that survived the initial floods cannot cope. Medical staff are trapped, sick, and exhausted. In Jakarta and Dhaka, Entire hospitals have been lost. Hundreds of patients drowned. 6 months of storms have changed humanity's psychology. Survivors are on edge, distrustful, exhausted, hyper-alert. People climb rooftops at night, listening for building collapse. Some attempt to escape in small boats, navigating currents twisting unpredictably between floating debris and vehicles. Panic spreads faster than the water. Riots, violence, and desperation are common. In Sao Paulo, survivors fight over debris and food, drowning despair in adrenaline and fear. Regions are completely isolated. Tokyo is cut off. Only scattered radio signals survive. London is an archipelago of flooded streets and canals. New York City survives only as rooftops and skyscraper tops. Mumbai, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro, Manila, Dhaka, all submerged, unreachable. Entire continents are severed under the global downpour. Meteorologists call it an atmospheric anomaly of unprecedented scale. Some speculate jet streams are trapped, forming a self-sustaining, hemisphere-spanning superstorm. Others suggest global warming and climate collapse reached a tipping point, producing a permanent rain cycle. Scientists cannot confirm. Survivors cannot care. There is only water and the battle to survive it. Death tolls are unimaginable. Current estimates suggest over 1.2 billion people dead, with billions more displaced. Coastal cities, river valleys, and low-lying regions are uninhabitable. Supplies are exhausted. Governments collapsed months ago. Military and emergency services were overwhelmed long ago. High-density cities such as New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, Dhaka, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, Manila, London, Cairo, and Shanghai are effectively ghost cities, populations lost beneath the water. Yet humanity clings to life. Mountain ranges like the Himalayas, Alps, Rockies, and Andes host tens of thousands of survivors who have climbed as far as possible, creating fragile shelters on peaks, plateaus, and cliffs. Floating settlements form in some regions, makeshift rafts, broken buildings lashed together, communities surviving on collected rainwater and edible plants. Even in despair, hope exists in small gestures. Radios transmit messages across flooded regions. Survivors signal each other with mirrors, lanterns, and reflective surfaces. Communities share knowledge of safe paths through currents, high ground, and floating debris. In New Orleans, the levees host scattered pockets of life, survivors building artificial high platforms. And still, the rain does not pause. It does not relent. There is no pattern, no mercy. Floodwaters continue to rise, swallowing entire cities inch by inch, carving new channels, reshaping continents. Survivors brace for collapse. Food, water, and shelter are rationed. Disease, exhaustion, and fear are constant. Humanity fights not only the water, but its own fragility. Yet, even amidst chaos, there is persistence. Survivors adapt. They build higher, move further inland or upward, fashion floating shelters, invent ways to farm in artificial environments, purify rainwater, and maintain communication where possible. Adaptation becomes the difference between life and death. Listeners, the world is drowning. Every city, valley, and plain is under water. The storm has lasted 6 months, and it may last far longer. But those who survive adapt, climb, float, and endure. Humanity survives not by controlling the storm, but by refusing to surrender. Remember this: the sky is relentless, the water merciless, the world we knew gone. But humanity endures. One rooftop, one floating shelter, one survivor at a time. I've walked through ruins that the storm has sculpted over 6 months. Cities once teeming with life now float like ghostly memories. Streets that carried laughter, footsteps, protests, and parades are rivers now, violent, brown, devouring everything in their path. I've seen the world swallowed in ways I never thought possible. New York City. The subways flooded first, trapping thousands in dark, suffocating tunnels. Then streets disappeared, 1 block at a time, until only rooftops remained. People clung to antennas and chimneys, waving frantically to anyone who might see them. I can still see the last family on a rooftop in Queens, mother holding 2 children tight, father paddling a broken door as a makeshift boat. They vanished overnight. Over 150,000 people lost here in the first wave. The city has become a graveyard, but one you can see only if you know how to float. Across the world, London lies underwater. Canary Wharf, the Tower of London, the streets along the Thames, gone beneath 6 meters of water. Survivors speak of floating through Trafalgar Square, clutching each other in terror. The roar of water drowning screams. Boats hit buildings like pebbles against walls. Food is gone. Fresh water is scarce. Disease spreads faster than the currents. Families drift apart. Some cling to strangers because they have no one else. Death here approaches 90,000, but no one is counting anymore. In Tokyo, Shibuya Crossing is unrecognizable. The bright neon lights flicker weakly above water that has claimed the streets, cars, and people. Office towers, once a symbol of bustling life, are skeletal islands. Survivors climb to rooftops, waving scarves and jackets, praying someone will see them through the rain and fog. I can hear them in my mind, the voices carried through crackling radios, desperate, fragile, pleading. 120,000 dead or missing here. Entire families lost. Mothers screaming for children who vanished. Fathers paddling through currents to reach them, but always too late. Mumbai, Karachi, Dhaka, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, Manila. Cities that were alive, thriving, pulsing, are now brown oceans with splintered islands of human persistence. Survivors cling to what they can. The tops of buses, crumbling buildings, floating debris. I've listened to messages from survivors who tell of waking up in what was once a familiar street, only to realize the pavement has disappeared. Trees float past like giants, lampposts twist in the current, and people are forced to navigate in water that seems alive, almost conscious, carrying the dead past them. Entire communities lost. 6 months of rain has turned roads into rivers that are stronger than any current I've ever known. Bridges have collapsed under the strain, sweeping cars, trucks, and people away. Rivers have merged with streets and canals, canals with lakes and seas, seas with the storm itself. The geography of the planet has changed. Mountains are now islands. Hills are islands in oceans of despair. Cities that were above the water 6 months ago are gone today. Over 1 billion dead worldwide. And every hour, more vanish into currents that never stop. I've spoken to survivors who tell of the night the rains tore through their neighborhoods. One woman from Cairo described sitting on the roof of her apartment, watching the Nile spill over like never before, sweeping her neighbors away while her children clung to her skirts. She survived because she climbed a taller building. Every day now is a gamble between choosing a lower, safer structure or climbing higher and risking exposure. Every decision has life or death consequences. Even in cities with floating debris to cling to, death is relentless. In Rio de Janeiro, survivors watch the waters swallow Copacabana and Ipanema, twisting the coastline into something unrecognizable. People drift past in shock, some crying, some silent. The bodies of strangers float alongside them, reminders that the world has become indiscriminate in its cruelty. They tell stories over radios, over messages in bottles, over signals, of being alone in the world, clinging to nothing but hope. And hope is fragile. Families are broken, separated by currents. Children cry for parents who cannot reach them. Parents scream into water that carries their voices away. The grief is endless. People scream at the clouds, at the rain, at the water, at fate itself. 6 months of this relentless torment has made humanity desperate in ways I cannot describe. Every heartbeat is survival. Every breath is stolen from the storm. Even infrastructure has betrayed humanity. Hospitals, schools, highways, subways, train stations, they all lie under water. The Grand Central Station in New York is unrecognizable. Victoria Station in London is a tomb beneath the water. Tokyo Station is nothing but a skeletal ruin. Vehicles drift past like toys, often with bodies inside, reminding the living that the flood has no memory, no mercy. Yet, there are moments of human defiance. Survivors who cling to rooftops in Mumbai create rope lines, tying strangers together to prevent anyone from being swept away. In Lagos, makeshift rafts fashioned from debris carry small families to slightly higher ground. In Venice, survivors navigate floating gondolas through streets, now rivers, rescuing those trapped. These acts are fleeting victories, but they are proof of human persistence. The water itself has taken on a personality. Survivors describe it as almost conscious, swirling to grab, push, and pull. It flows through alleys like a predator. It penetrates buildings, fills apartments, seeps under doors and through ventilation systems. People speak of feeling the water move beneath their feet like it knows them, like it has a plan. The fear is constant. You never know where it will rise next. One moment, the floor beneath you seems solid. The next, it collapses or surges, and lives are lost in an instant. And still, amidst this overwhelming destruction, survivors adapt. They create rafts, build floating shelters, climb higher, ration food, share water, and find solace in small gestures, helping someone reach a safe roof, tossing a rope to a drowning child, sharing a piece of bread with a neighbor. It is humanity at its rawest. Frightened, desperate, terrified, yet somehow still caring. Listeners, the world as we knew it has vanished beneath the rain. Cities are gone. Roads are gone. Streets, squares, markets, parks, they have all been swallowed. Lives are gone. Families are broken. Entire populations are gone. Only fragments survive, clinging to rooftops, floating debris, and the faint hope that somehow the rain will end. And yet, humanity persists. Even in drowned cities, even under rivers that were once streets, even amid staggering death tolls, people endure. Some cling to hope. Some cling to each other. And that is the final, fragile truth of this new world. Survival is no longer about land, about buildings, about safety. It is about adapting, enduring, and refusing to surrender to the water. I speak now for those who no longer have voices, those who drowned silently, whose cries were swallowed by 6 months of unending rain. The water does not discriminate. It does not pause for grief. It does not hear prayers. It has claimed the young and old, the strong and the frail, the dreamers and the despairing. And in its silence, it has written a history of humanity that few will ever hear. I've spoken with survivors who cling to rooftops, floating debris, and mountain peaks. They tell stories of families lost in a single night. In Dhaka, a mother recounted holding her son in her arms as water rose past her waist, then chest, then neck. She fought currents that twisted like snakes, but ultimately, the river took him. She floated alone for days before reaching a school roof. Her story is one of countless others, repeated endlessly across continents. Tokyo has become a city of ghosts. Survivors speak of children calling for parents who cannot reach them, of parents weeping for children swept away while trying to hold on to anything floating. Streets are lined with bodies that drift silently in currents, yet the living must pass them, scavenging whatever they can. Food, clothes, tools. Each encounter with death is a reminder that humanity is fragile and survival is temporary. In New York, rooftops have become tiny villages. Families cling together, rationing water and food salvaged from floating debris. But even here, death stalks every corner. A man I heard over a distant radio described his wife slipping from a makeshift rope line while helping neighbors reach higher ground. He pulled her from the water, but she had drowned already. Her body floated away, and he was left with nothing but the memory of her last gasp. Over 6 months, tens of thousands perished in similar ways across the city. Mumbai is a city I cannot forget. Whole neighborhoods vanished overnight. Survivors tell of streets that once teemed with life, now flowing as rivers of debris and bodies. Children clutch their mothers. Grandparents cling to anything sturdy, yet still, the waters claim them. Some hold on to each other for hours, only to be ripped apart by sudden surges. Families die in clusters. Communities dissolve. The death toll in Mumbai alone surpasses 250,000, but numbers matter less than faces, voices, and lives lost. Even in London, survivors speak of trying to save each other while the Thames swallowed streets and squares. Elderly residents trapped in nursing homes clung to each other as the water rose, calling for help that never came. Children cried for parents in high-rise apartments turned islands. The cold rain seeped through clothes, skin, walls. The grief was palpable, electric. By the time the storm subsided momentarily, most of those trapped were gone. Karachi, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, Manila. The stories repeat over and over, like an unending refrain of despair. People floating through streets, holding children, clutching onto loved ones, only to be swept away by currents that do not stop. One survivor from Lagos told me he clung to his younger brother on a floating slab of concrete. The current turned, and in seconds, his brother was gone. He spent 6 days drifting alone before reaching higher ground. The emptiness in his voice. I cannot describe it. And still, humanity mourns. Survivors gather where they can, creating memorials on rooftops, tying cloths to antennas, leaving offerings on floating debris. They call out names into the storm, hoping someone, anyone, will hear. But the water carries nothing but the echoes of their voices. In these moments, grief becomes ritual. The living remember the dead because the dead cannot be counted, cannot be buried, cannot be mourned properly. 6 months of rain has created a world where death is constant. Global death tolls now exceed 1.5 billion, but numbers cannot capture the horror. Every person is a story, a family, a memory erased by water. I have recorded messages from survivors in Tokyo, New York, Mumbai, Dhaka, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro, London, Lagos, each telling of parents, children, siblings, neighbors lost in moments when the world was too full of water to save them. The psychological toll is enormous. Survivors describe guilt for being alive, despair at seeing bodies float past, exhaustion so profound that sleep is impossible. Some scream at the sky. Some whisper names over the radio, hoping they will somehow reach the lost. Some have simply gone silent, staring at the endless gray, waiting for the water to claim them too. Yet, amidst all this death, there are acts of humanity. People share the little they have: food, shelter, blankets, hope. Neighbors pass water to one another, hold children together, build makeshift rafts to rescue strangers. These moments are fleeting, but precious. They remind the living that survival is more than clinging to a roof or floating debris. It is the compassion that refuses to die, even when everything else has. And here is the cruel paradox. The more you cling to hope, the more the rain tests you. Children learn quickly how to float. Parents learn to navigate currents. Elders tell stories, even as they know they might not see the next day. Communities create rope lines, floating pathways, signal systems, anything to survive another hour, another day. Humanity adapts, even in the face of overwhelming loss. Listeners, I want you to understand what 6 months of this storm has done to the human heart. It has drowned cities, rivers, roads, but it has also drowned families, dreams, voices. Millions of people live now as fragments, holding memories that water cannot take, but that are heavy enough to crush the spirit. They are lost in body or lost in grief, but they remain human. They endure because they must. They endure because the storm has no pause, no mercy, and the alternative, giving up, is impossible. Remember their names, even if only in your mind. The children who cried for their parents, the parents who screamed for their children, the families ripped apart by currents, the strangers who held hands in desperation, the survivors who drifted alone for days, weeks, or months, watching the water claim everyone else. The world is drowned, but the human heart persists. The sun has become a memory. A story people tell their children in whispers, like a fairy tale that never truly existed. No dawn, no dusk, only the endless gray, oppressive clouds that weigh on every city, every street, every human soul. People forget what sunlight feels like. The warmth on your skin, the light that makes colors, shadows, and smiles. Children born into this world know only gray. Their eyes adjust to dimness. Their skin chills beneath cold rain that seeps into everything. People stop noticing when the day begins or ends. Time itself becomes meaningless when every day is the same unbroken storm. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai. The familiar skylines no longer exist. They are waterlogged ruins, skeletal silhouettes, floating tombs. Survivors climb to rooftops, antennas, and whatever tall structures remain. They watch the sky for a glimpse of light that never comes. Some pray, some scream, some sit in silence, staring at a world without seasons, without shadows, without hope. The psychological toll is profound. Human minds are not built for this. People wake to the same gray light, or lack of it, every day. Sleep becomes impossible for many. Nights are indistinguishable from day. The constant sound of water pounding on metal, concrete, and earth prevents rest. People hallucinate. They see shapes in the rain, hear voices carried by the storm, imagine children laughing or screaming in the water, when in truth, the storm has already claimed them. In Dhaka, survivors speak of climbing to school rooftops and seeing the streets, once full of markets, rickshaws, and laughter, now transformed into rivers where bodies and debris drift endlessly. Mothers whisper names into the gray, hoping the water will return their children, only to receive silence. Fathers stand in the rain, motionless, unable to save themselves or anyone else. Communities crumble under the weight of grief and exhaustion. Even nature has grown silent, subdued under the relentless rain. Birds no longer sing. They huddle in high trees, clinging to branches that bend under the water's weight. Animals that survive the flood swim or float in currents, scavenging among debris. Crops rot under the constant gray drizzle. Fresh food is scarce. Humans scavenge whatever is left. Floating crates, overturned cars, soggy stores. Hunger and thirst are constant companions, gnawing alongside fear. And yet, there are acts of adaptation. Survivors build higher platforms, float makeshift rafts, and create signals to guide one another. Children learn to swim, to float, to climb. Adults patrol currents, rescuing strangers. In Venice, survivors navigate the flooded streets, pulling children from debris, moving families from one floating island to another. Every act of survival is a battle, every day a victory against the overwhelming despair. The storm has changed how humans perceive the world. Water is no longer just a hazard, it is a permanent landscape. People chart floating pathways through submerged cities. They recognize currents as if streets still existed. Buildings that remain above water become small islands of civilization. Survivors tie ropes between rooftops, fashion bridges from debris, and create networks to communicate across flooded zones. Yet for every person saved, there are dozens swept away. death continues unabated. Over 6 months, the global death toll has surpassed 1.8 billion. Cities are unrecognizable. In Rio de Janeiro, Christ the Redeemer watches silently over a drowned city. In New Orleans, survivors cling to levees, which are barely holding. In Shanghai, entire districts float away like islands in a gray sea. In every city, death is personal. Neighbors, friends, siblings, children. Survivors carry the weight of every loss as heavily as the rain that surrounds them. People speak of madness creeping into their minds. Long-term survivors describe hallucinations, voices of the lost calling from beneath the water, visions of sunlit streets, laughter echoing in empty buildings. Some retreat into silence, refusing to speak, staring at the endless gray. Others shout, sing, or bang on metal to make themselves feel alive. Every human response is magnified. Fear, grief, hope, despair, because the world is stripped down to its most primal reality, survival against an indifferent flood. Yet, amidst the darkness, small sparks of human resilience persist. Communities on rooftops or high mountains share food, water, and stories. They ration rainwater. They create floating gardens. They mark safe paths across flooded neighborhoods. In Tokyo, survivors float between rooftops, guiding each other like shepherds through a gray sea. In Mumbai, survivors build rafts to transport the sick and elderly. Even when the storm shows no mercy, humanity refuses to surrender completely. The 6 months of unending rain have turned the world into something unrecognizable. The planet's surface is a gray, moving ocean, punctuated only by the skeletons of drowned cities, the tips of towers, and scattered survivors clinging to life. People speak of the lost sun, a symbol of everything humanity once knew and now mourns. Children ask what it looks like. Adults hesitate, unable to describe a light that is no longer part of their lives. Listeners, I want you to understand this. 6 months of endless rain has taken more than lives. It has taken light, warmth, routine, certainty. It has forced humans to confront the raw, unbearable fragility of existence. Every day is a struggle against water, hunger, disease, and despair. Every day is a reminder that the world as we knew it has vanished beneath gray skies and ceaseless rain. And yet, humanity endures. Survivors cling to life, to each other, to fragments of memory. They improvise, adapt, and resist despair, finding meaning in survival itself. Even in eternal gray, humans create islands of light through compassion, ingenuity, and sheer stubbornness. The world is drowning, but humanity still clings to life. Those who survive have learned to rise above, literally. The streets, the highways, the squares, all swallowed by relentless water, have pushed survivors upwards. Rooftops, towers, mountain slopes, they are the new ground. I have heard stories from New York, where survivors converted skyscraper rooftops into small communities. They have lashed together floating debris, furniture, and planks to create rafts and bridges connecting neighboring buildings. Families that were once neighbors on streets now cling to each other across concrete canyons of water. Children learn to swim between rooftops, guided by ropes and makeshift signals. Parents scavenge from the waves below, searching for food, water, or even salvaged medicine. Some cry when they find nothing but debris. Some smile faintly when they retrieve a single can of food. Every day is survival. Every day a battle against despair. In Mumbai, survivors have climbed the tallest buildings they can reach. On one rooftop, a man has created a rainwater collection system using tarps, barrels, and leftover plumbing. He shared water with 20 families around him. Children tend to small gardens of floating vegetables, plants that survive in makeshift containers of soil and water. These gardens are fragile lifelines, feeding bodies and spirits alike. Without these small acts, life here would be impossible. The mountains have become the ultimate sanctuary. In the Himalayas, Alps, Rockies, and Andes, small communities cling to peaks and plateaus above the floods that have swallowed the lands below. Survivors in these regions tell of how they scramble up slopes in days-long ascents, carrying whatever they can: children, blankets, supplies. Each step is a gamble. A misstep could mean being swept away by temporary landslides or swollen streams. Yet at the top, there is a fragile sense of safety. Water cannot reach here, at least not yet. Even here, life is brutal. Food is scarce. Water, although cleaner than city floods, is limited. Disease still spreads in close-quartered shelters, and the psychological toll is severe. People speak of nightmares, hallucinations, and the crushing weight of grief. Every survivor carries memories of those lost in the streets, in houses, in rivers, in cities now unrecognizable. They mourn every neighbor, every friend, every family member swept away by 6 months of unending rain. Yet, survival breeds ingenuity. In Tokyo, survivors create floating platforms atop partially submerged buildings, connecting them with planks and ropes. They fish in the polluted water below, collect rainwater in barrels, and share supplies. Every act of creation, no matter how small, feels like a defiance against the storm. In Venice, people ride gondolas adapted into rafts, ferrying the sick, injured, and elderly to higher ground. Even children play a vital role, carrying messages, tying ropes, helping guide rafts through debris-laden streets. Humanity adapts because it must. Communication has become a lifeline. Radios like this one are sacred tools. Survivors broadcast warnings, updates, and messages of hope. One group in Lagos sent coordinates to nearby floating communities, creating a network of safe zones. In Dhaka, survivors use colored flags and reflective mirrors to signal each other across rooftops. These fragile networks are lifelines, connecting the few remaining people scattered across the drowned planet. Communities are forming in ways humanity has never seen before. People cooperate out of necessity. Strangers become family. Skills once taken for granted, swimming, climbing, fishing, bartering, become essential. Leaders emerge naturally. Those with knowledge of currents, weather patterns, or basic engineering guide others to survive. Conflict still exists. Resources are scarce. But cooperation often wins, because the storm will not wait. The psychological toll is heavy, but rising above also brings perspective. From the tops of rooftops and mountain peaks, survivors see the scale of devastation. Cities that were once vibrant are now skeletal islands. Forests have been stripped, rivers swollen beyond comprehension. Yet at the same time, people see the glimmer of human endurance. From above, communities working together, signals being sent, rafts navigating the currents. It is fragile, but it is proof that humans refuse to vanish entirely. Death still surrounds them. New York, Mumbai, Tokyo, Rio, Lagos, London. The cities below are graveyards. Every current carries bodies, debris, and memories. Survivors see them floating past and are forced to look away because despair can paralyze. Yet, the fact that they survived the initial waves, the 6 months of endless rain, means they carry hope. Every life saved becomes more precious because it is so rare. 6 months of rain have reshaped humanity not only physically, but mentally. Those on rooftops, mountains, and floating platforms speak of gratitude for small things. A barrel of clean water, a piece of floating bread, the warmth of another human hand. These simple acts sustain them, keep them alive, remind them of what it means to be human in a world that has almost forgotten humanity. Listeners, rising above is no longer a choice. It is survival. The waters have claimed the streets, homes, cities, but humanity has climbed. It has floated. It has adapted. Every person alive atop a rooftop, mountain, or raft is a testament to the stubbornness of life itself. Even in a world where over 100 million people have died, even in a planet drenched and gray, humans endure. They endure because they must. They endure because surrendering is not an option. And yet, there is fragility in every heartbeat. Every storm surge, every weakened structure, every disease outbreak threatens to erase what little remains. But for now, survivors rise above, holding on to each other, holding on to hope, holding on to life itself. They have learned to float, climb, and build in ways humanity never imagined. They have learned that survival is not about controlling the storm, but living alongside it. The rain does not pause. The storm does not sleep. Humanity struggles atop rooftops, mountains, and floating debris, but survival comes at a price. The price is hunger. The price is sickness. The price is exhaustion. And every day, that cost grows heavier. Food is scarce. People forage the floating wreckage, scavenging crates, cans, and whatever supplies drift past. Crops rot in submerged fields, livestock drowned or swept away. Children often go hungry. Mothers ration what little food they have, skipping meals themselves so their children can eat. Fathers push themselves past exhaustion to paddle rafts, search for stores, or create floating gardens from debris. Hunger gnaws at bodies and minds, making survival even more brutal. In Mumbai, survivors tell stories of floating through streets looking for scraps of food. One man described seeing a crate of rice drifting past, only to have it sink moments later beneath the current. Families cried silently as their chance at a meal vanished. In Dhaka, small communities fight over fish caught from the polluted waters. Every bite is a blessing. Every morsel a memory of a world that once had abundance. Water, though abundant, is not always clean. Drinking untreated rainwater or contaminated floodwater leads to disease. Cholera, dysentery, leptospirosis. These names echo across drowned cities. New York, Lagos, Tokyo, Rio de Janeiro, Cairo. Hospitals are mostly gone. Makeshift clinics on rooftops or rafts serve what they can, using salvaged medicines and hope. Many sick people die before help arrives. Survivors describe the agonizing choice of who receives treatment and who cannot be saved. Children suffer the most. Weak from hunger, terrified of currents, many fall ill quickly. Parents cling to them, wrapping them in whatever insulation they can find, sharing what little food or medicine they have. Yet despite these efforts, death touches the young constantly. Mothers whisper apologies, fathers scream in frustration, neighbors hold hands in despair. Every life lost leaves a scar that cannot be measured. The psychological toll is immense. Survivors describe a constant pressure in their chests, a weight of grief that grows heavier each day. 6 months of continuous rain have shattered sleep cycles, distorted time, and warped the mind. Many hallucinate. They see loved ones in the water, hear cries that are not real, imagine dry streets and sunlight. Some cling desperately to memories, reciting names, dates, and stories over and over to feel human in a world dominated by water. In Tokyo, survivors cling to rooftops, some muttering to themselves for hours, convinced the storm will let up if they keep talking. In London, children dream of parks, sunlight, and playgrounds as they float in crates with their families, unaware that the world they imagine no longer exists. Adults fight despair, but the mental strain is relentless. Fear of death, loss, and isolation gnaws constantly. Disease spreads faster than people can adapt. Bodies floating past communities carry infection. Contaminated water infects the living. Starvation weakens immunity. Survivors describe the agonizing sight of a neighbor's child or spouse falling ill, knowing there is little that can be done. Communities improvise quarantine areas, floating makeshift hospitals, and ration scarce medicine. Every choice is a moral burden. Every decision carries a weight heavier than the storm itself. Hunger, sickness, and fear create tension. Conflicts arise over resources, floating crates, edible plants, clean water. But humanity's instinct to cooperate often wins. Survivors barter food, share medicine, and take turns fishing from the floodwaters. They create networks to rescue the sick, share news, and distribute supplies. Compassion is not universal, but where it exists, it sustains life and hope. Even amidst despair, resilience persists. In Venice, survivors form floating gardens using crates and soil, growing edible plants. In New York, a group of survivors organizes rafts to collect rainwater and deliver it to those in need. In Mumbai, makeshift kitchens serve small meals, allowing children and the sick to survive another day. Each act of ingenuity is a rebellion against the storm, a refusal to surrender. But the toll is visible everywhere. Hollowed faces, thin bodies, sunken eyes, trembling hands. Parents grieving lost children, children grieving lost parents. Families torn apart by currents or disease, communities diminished. The cost of survival is not just physical. It is emotional, psychological, and moral. Survivors must endure not only hunger and sickness, but the constant sight of death. 6 months of rain have created a planet where humanity fights for every breath, every meal, every drop of clean water. Global death tolls surpass 700 million, yet survivors continue. They endure because surrender is impossible. They endure because hope, fragile, fleeting, human, is still alive. Even in the face of relentless water, disease, and hunger, humanity clings to life. Listeners, this is the truth of survival under endless rain. It is never easy. It is never fair. It is never without pain, but it is life. Children cling to their parents. Families cling to each other. Communities cling to survival itself. They adapt. They endure. They resist. 6 months. Half a year. And the rain, it still falls. Yet, amidst the relentless deluge, something remarkable is happening. Survivors are beginning to create not just temporary shelters, but sustainable ways to endure. Human ingenuity glimmers like faint sunlight behind endless clouds, fragile yet undeniable. In New York, survivors have transformed rooftops into small, interlinked communities. Floating platforms of debris, salvaged wood, and tarps connect buildings like a new network of streets. Rainwater collection systems now feed small gardens where vegetables grow in makeshift containers. Families share every seed, every drop of water, every morsel of food, knowing that cooperation is the only path forward. Children tend to these gardens, learning not just survival, but the skills necessary for the future. Tokyo has become a city of floating ingenuity. Survivors have constructed rafts large enough to carry entire families. Rainwater filtration systems using salvaged plastics and sand purify water for drinking. Floating platforms serve as schools, clinics, and markets. Children navigate these streets like toys, tiny sailors, learning skills their parents never imagined they would need at such young ages. Communities create warning systems for currents and debris, using mirrors, flags, and improvised radios. In a world dominated by water, human creativity is becoming a lifeline. In Venice, survivors have repurposed gondolas into floating homes, connecting them to rooftops and platforms. Floating gardens grow herbs and vegetables. Fishermen improvise nets from debris to catch small fish in canals turned rivers. Even amid loss and grief, there is laughter again. Children playing in shallow pools on platforms, adults sharing small meals, musicians creating songs to remember the world that once was and to celebrate the life that remains. Communities are now thinking in terms of long-term survival. In Lagos, survivors have designed floating structures that can withstand surges. In Mumbai, rafts carry entire families between safer platforms. In Dhaka, floating hospitals provide basic care for the sick and injured. People are no longer simply surviving. They are learning to live in this drowned world. Every plank, every rope, every barrel has been repurposed to serve life. Every act of ingenuity is an act of defiance against despair. The psychological impact of these innovations is profound. Hope, even fragile and fleeting, strengthens the human spirit. Survivors speak of purpose returning. Parents teach children navigation, gardening, and carpentry. Communities hold ceremonies for those lost, but also for those who continue to survive. People laugh, sing, and create, finding small joys even when surrounded by endless gray and water. Even in extreme environments, Humans adapt socially. Leaders guide floating neighborhoods, mediate conflicts, and allocate resources fairly. Education continues, with children learning basic survival skills alongside traditional subjects salvaged from books or improvised teaching materials. Mutual aid becomes the glue that holds communities together. Acts of compassion, sharing food, rescuing stranded neighbors, teaching a skill, become the currency of life itself. In New York, a survivor broadcast over the radio how a group of engineers converted an abandoned skyscraper rooftop into a multi-level floating city. Rainwater is collected, plants are grown, solar panels salvaged from nearby buildings provide minimal energy, and rafts ferry people and supplies between platforms. The city, once drowned, is slowly being reimagined. Children play, parents teach, elders guide. Life persists because humans refuse to surrender entirely. Innovation is not limited to cities. In mountainous regions, survivors create terraced platforms to capture rainwater and cultivate small crops. They fashion tools and containers from debris, ensuring that survival does not depend solely on luck or scavenging. Communities in the Alps and Rockies use rope bridges to connect mountain villages, allowing the exchange of food, water, and knowledge. In the drowned lowlands, floating societies send supplies upstream, creating networks of cooperation spanning hundreds of miles. Hope, however fragile, is contagious. Where one rooftop village flourishes, nearby survivors are inspired to imitate it. Rafts carrying knowledge, seeds, tools, and medicines float to new areas. People who were isolated for months are rediscovering the meaning of connection. Communication, through radios, signals, or simple messages tied to floating objects, becomes a lifeline, stitching together a fractured humanity. Yet even as hope grows, the storm remains. Currents still carry death and debris. Disease, hunger, and exhaustion persist. Every day is a careful balance between creativity and survival. But glimmers of ingenuity show that humanity is capable of more than endurance. Humans are capable of creating life where all seems lost. Communities are learning to thrive despite a world transformed beyond recognition. Listeners, 6 months of endless rain have drowned cities, rivers, streets, and fields. Millions are gone. Yet humanity persists, rising above the water, adapting and creating new ways to survive. We are seeing the first signs of civilization re-emerging. Floating cities, communal gardens, schools, hospitals, and networks of communication. The storm has not defeated us entirely. Even in despair, ingenuity, hope, and human resilience shine like fragile lights in the gray. 6 months of endless rain have drowned our world. Cities vanished, millions lost, lives swept away. Yet humanity clings to life. Floating cities, rooftop communities, mountain refuges. We survive by ingenuity, compassion, and sheer stubbornness. Children swim, elders teach, families hold on. The storm shows no mercy, but we adapt. This signal is proof we endured. The world we knew is gone, but life persists. Humanity's future is fragile, uncertain, yet alive. As long as there is breath, there is hope.